Hi, Jen.
Hi, Tesha.
I'll tell you something that happened to me yesterday. I don't know if
Yes.
you're superstitious at all.
Not really, but I always like to hear stories.
I was driving my kids, I was going to drop my kids off at school, and then I was going to the passport office.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm driving my kids to school, a black cat like crosses in front of my car, so I have to slam on the brakes. I looked at my kids. I was like, guys, that's bad luck. And then there was like a whole conversation about how it's not really bad luck and whatever. And my daughter loves cats. It's like, cats are not bad luck. I'm like, well, it's only black cats. And she's like, how dare people say that? I'm like, okay, well, whatever. But I was a little bit thinking,
I could see your older one rationalizing you out of it, being like, "Mommy, that's just silly."
so I get to the passport office, which I booked my appointment for, and I have the photo, like I have all my things. And she starts asking me like questions about my husband, like, where's your husband? And I'm like, is he with you? And I'm like, no. She's like, where is he? I'm like, at work. She's like, where's he work? I'm like, what is going on here? I didn't get him to sign the application for the kids' passports. It only had my signature on it.
Oh,
I had to leave and come back. And ever since then, I've been blaming it on that damn black cat. That is all.
but that happened before you saw the cat.
No.
You had the papers together, didn't you?
Yes, but I still think it was like somehow.
Because at that point, you couldn't have had John sign the papers without going to school.
Nope. I know. I was blaming on the black cat anyway, so I had to go back again today. And
can't you just mail that stuff in, or are you on a timeline?
Yeah, so because we're planning to travel within 25 business days, I need to go in person, and like it's a whole thing. Like you have to make an appointment, and anyways, they're really nice about it, and I got my appointment, and so
everything's okay now.
We shall see, but yeah.
It should be fine.
I got that done.
They would have told you there. They wouldn't have accepted it if there was going to be any more problems, I don't think. Based on my multitude of experiences with passports in 2 countries and all of that stuff.
No, I mean, they go over everything right there in front of you. So I'm sure that everything is fine.
Funny story about passports. Logan's, my eldest's first passport we got when he was 2 weeks old. And it's not easy to get an infant's passport picture. And we got it done, and I bring it up there, and the woman's like, I can't accept this. And we went somewhere that does passport pictures. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, there's a line through it. And there was like faint line through it. So it didn't work. So we had to go do it again.
Fun.
Yeah. And like I was 2 weeks post like C-section. It was not it. I think it was actually my first real outing after he was born. So yeah, it's hard for me not to think of that experience when I think about passport renewal.
And like my kids were hilarious taking the passport photo because you're not allowed to smile, which is like completely contrary to what they've been taught.
Children. Yeah.
Right. So my youngest face is like, whatever, they accepted the photo, but I think it's hilarious because I don't think it's really like, it's not really her resting face. It's more of like
it's not really what they look like.
It's more of like I'm not supposed to smile. I don't know.
Are any of them real? Is it ever really your resting face? Like I look at some of mine and I'm like, I really hope I don't look like that when I'm just sitting there.
I look remarkably like my mother in my passport photo and in everyday life.
I mean, I think you do. You just do.
I asked my husband today how much he thinks a nose job costs because like he's like, what, you want a nose job? I was like, yeah. He's like, why? I'm like, so I don't look like my mom anymore. I can't take it. Like I just look in the mirror and I'm like, I look like my mother. I can't do this anymore. What can I do to look different?
Oh my God. Does your mom listen? That's amazing.
So
that is amazing.
I mean, does my mom listen? She listens to some episodes sometimes, yes. So hopefully she's not listening to this one.
Jerry, Tesha loves you. She just doesn't want to look so much like you.
Sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I sent you a video for an IG thing we were making the other day. And
yeah, you did look like your mom there, actually.
I'm just looking at the video. I'm like, oh my God, I look like my mother. Like, it's just, guys, we're gonna have to like share a picture of me and my mom somewhere so you can see
I think
what we're
next,
talking
I think
about.
after this episode releases, we're going to do that. We're definitely going to do that. Speaking of this episode,
so much fun. I really enjoyed this conversation and talking to her. And Amber is going to talk to us about her experience going to jail. She signed a plea deal or plea bargain or whatever you call it.
Mhm.
So she's not able, and she's trying to apply for clemency. So that means that she's not really able to go into a lot of detail about what her, like the actual details of her case. So she talks a bit more about her experience. However, I will link articles in the show notes where you can read more about her actual case.
And she's like, I don't know, it was a really fun conversation.
Absolutely.
In
She's
true to
fantastic.
form, I didn't know anything about her besides what Tesha told me. So I had zero clue what to expect. I actually didn't have any like preconceived notions, which we talk a lot about in the episode about what somebody who's been to prison is like. But I feel like, Amber and Tesha and I could easily sit down and drink pots of coffee together or bottles of wine and just hang out. So it was super fun. And I hope you guys have fun listening to it as much as I had fun recording it.
Yes.
And don't forget, if you want to support the show, we have our Patreon, which is an amazing way to help us keep putting these episodes out. If a monthly subscription isn't for you, you can also buy us a coffee or 3, and that is super helpful as well. It all goes directly into costs of producing the show and shows us that you love the work we're doing. And if you can't do any of that, share with all your friends and enjoy the episode. Hi, I'm Jen, and welcome back to Now What?
And I'm Tesha. Today we're going to be joined by Amber, and she is the founder of the Bean Down Project, which is how I found her and reached out to her and asked her to be on the show for us this week. She's also a mom and a former spec ed administrator, and she also spent 11 months in prison, which is what we're going to talk about today, right? So welcome, Amber.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Like I said, I'm really excited. This is my first international podcast. So hello, Canada. Unfortunately, I can't visit there anymore because I am a felon. So it makes me sad.
And I know this is a podcast. I mean, I don't even know stereotypically what a felon would look like, but Amber, you are not what one would think a felon might look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so many preconceptions of what that looks like,
for sure.
Right? I mean, you are university educated, right? Like I don't know, like that's also something we don't think of when we think of who ends up going to prison.
And I was guilty of it myself, right?
Yeah.
Because before I went to prison, I never thought about prison. Right. And you just think, okay, somebody does something bad and they go to prison, right? It's bad people, right? It's a place for bad people. And, that's one of the first things I get all the time. Oh my God, I never would have thought you went to prison. And so then that became this question, like, well, what does someone who was incarcerated look like? Right. While I was incarcerated with oncologists, lawyers, accountants, administrators, like just people from all walks of life. Right. And then some other people, maybe, that were addicted to substances and different things too. So, there was no stereotypical look, though, of what, someone incarcerated looked like,
Totally. But I feel like because of like what we see, whether it's fictional or not, you have this idea in your head, I think, of what, right? Who's in jail.
Definitely. Especially like in the movies, right?
Yeah, you got to be tough. You got to be kind of rough around the edges.
Yeah, that's one of my jokes. Like, I've never been in a physical altercation. Like, oh my God, I'm going to go to prison and I don't know how to fight, right? Like, I have like zero self-defense skills. So I'm like, what's gonna happen, when I go to prison and somebody tries to like, rough me up or something, but luckily that never happened. But like just as these are the things that are portrayed in the media. And so this
Yeah.
is what I was thinking that I was gonna have to be up against. So
I would totally think of that if I was in that position. I'd be like,
I same thing. So you never imagined you were gonna go in jail. Like you didn't grow up around people who were being
no,
incarcerated. And
no.
so how do you end up going to prison?
So I end up going to prison. My charge was mail fraud, and I responded to an email on my federal government account, and they deemed it to be inappropriate, and they said that's how it's the charge is mail fraud, right? Now the funny thing is when I went to prison and everybody found out that my charge was mail fraud, they're like, oh, or were you sending drugs in the mail, right? Because that's typically what the charge mail fraud kind of goes to, or if you're tampering with someone's mail or stealing checks or something out of the mail, it's generally to do with that. But no one had ever heard of it as email, but you could, it means like a scheme. So they felt that I devised a scheme through this email. And that is how I got the charge mail fraud. Now, they also investigated me for years. I was investigated from 2012 until 2019.
So
that is a long time.
Did this happen? This happened in like 2012, 2011?
This happened in actually 2011.
Okay.
Right. And then they started investigating us in 2012. And then I got indicted in 2017. And then I got sentenced in 2019. So this was a really long, drawn out situation. It was mentally like just exhausting. Emotionally, just having something looming over your head for years is, it's just a lot to deal with. And then on top of that, like financially, having to have an attorney for that many years, I was relieved almost when it was over. I wasn't happy with the outcome, but at least there was an outcome. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
At least it was over.
Exactly.
That part.
This part is over. At least I know what my next step is,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you knew they were investigating you all of those years. Like
the whole time they came to me, I got an attorney, I worked with them, and everything was really amicable. And I never really understood what they were doing, right? Because every time they would come with a different charge. So mail fraud is just finally what they landed on. And again, I really feel that was over a technicality, right? But they tried every charge. And that's what my attorney says, that the federal US government, they try to take any charge they have and they throw it at you, and whatever sticks, right? And most people end up pleading out and that's why they have like a 98.99% conviction rate, right? Because you can't outspend the federal government, no matter how hard I try. You know what I mean? Like they have unlimited resources and unlimited money. So it was also really intimidating seeing my name versus the United States government on a piece of paper, right? So, they use these intimidation tactics. Like I had met with them probably at least 10 times. But in 2017, they showed up to my house at 6:15 in the morning with the FBI, with the DC local police, and with the US Marshals with their guns drawn. And they pulled me out of the house with shackles. Now, this is a non-violent offense. I have never been in any trouble before. And they came to my house. I live on a small street in a little cul-de-sac at 6:15 in the morning and pulled me out of my house, right? With my 2-year-old son, he's screaming. It was just really unnecessary, unnecessarily aggressive, but that was one of their scare tactics. Like, and that's kind of what the FBI is known to do. They use all of these scare tactics on you. And not to mention the amount of resources that they used just to come and get me. I would have surrendered. If you wanted to indict me, you could have called my attorney like you've been doing and saying, hey, we need to have this meeting, and I show up. And then I think I was incarcerated for about 7 hours, and they let me go because they knew that I wasn't going to run, and because I had a family and I wasn't a threat. So It's very unnecessary.
Well, yeah, and I would have to imagine just traumatic. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like,
And it's essentially for an email.
No, definitely.
Okay.
At work, like for work stuff too, right? Like,
well, I was going to say, if you weren't working for a federal agency, would this have even?
no, if I was in actually even in a state, right? Because DC is not considered a state,
Right.
then I don't even know that this would have been an issue at all.
Gotcha.
So,
right, but it became a federal issue
Because of your job.
yes.
Just the idea that they would show up with that many people for an email is just wild to me.
Well, those resources could be going to better use,
to so
not
much
to
more.
arresting a mom, you know what I mean, who doesn't have a criminal history at all, who they have no reason, like they would have no reason to think that you're going to be violent.
No.
For example, like sometimes they know this person has a history of being violent towards the police or something.
Right.
You have no previous record. They have no reason to think that you're going to be violent towards them. Like you said, just contact my lawyer and I'll turn myself in.
Yeah.
People
I had
do
just
that a
been
lot.
coming. I didn't want to ever go and meet with them, right? Because it was the worst, but I always showed up. Right. And that was even
send an agent to the house if you have to.
Even if you something
like one or two.
One or two, but I mean, like they were like in my grass, like hiding, like with their. I was like, oh my God, and it's so funny because I was I had started doing Bikram yoga, and I usually was at the 6 a.m. Class, and that morning I was like, I am so lazy, I don't want to go. So I think it was almost a good thing because if they had have pulled me out of yoga, I would have been so
mortified.
Right. And the day before, there was an agent sitting outside of my house. And I remember I was taking my son to the library, right? Because I was a stay-at-home mom at that point because they had put me on administrative leave from my job while they were investigating me, which is another thing, a waste of resources, right? So again, like I said, I was investigated from 2012 until 2019. So they paid me my salary and benefits that entire time.
Wow.
This is from like a failing school district, right? Like DC's school system is not amazing. So to take these resources away, right? From a failing school district was ridiculous. So I was taking my son to the library and like they were just waiting outside my house looking at me, I guess just checking my schedule to see when I was leaving, when I was coming back. And they sure enough caught me that morning. So I'm assuming that they would have seen me go to yoga. But the law is that you cannot get anyone before 6 a.m. if you come to their house like that.
Oh.
Yeah. So
they waited until 6:15.
So they waited. I got a 15-minute grace period, you know?
Amazing.
That's crazy.
So they arrest you. And what is your lawyer telling you at this point? Like,
so it took me a while to even be able to get a phone call, right? Because then they take me through these shenanigans, right? And again, like I was in shackles. So my hands are clasped, then I have the long chain going down to my ankles. Now, I'd never been arrested before, and it was October, and I just needed to throw something quick on. So I think I had on like a white V-neck shirt that I was sleeping in. I threw on like some boyfriend jeans and like Birkenstocks. Okay, so this is me headed
your mom uniform.
right, my super mom uniform, right? Like headed to like I'm like shuffling, and so I didn't know that I should have put on socks because those shackles really hurt your ankles, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm just like first of all I'm in shock, and they're just like business as usual. They're like cracking jokes. I'm like in a car with like 3 agents, you know, in the back seat, and they're like, "Oh, I wish I had gotten Starbucks. You know, do you think we could stop and get Starbucks?" And I'm like, "You assholes are ruining my life, and you're talking about, you know, getting Starbucks and
because this was just what they do every day.
Every day, this is what we do. We ruin your life every fucking day, right?" So,
oh my God.
So they take me first to the FBI building where I get my photos taken and fingerprinted, and that's the first stop. Then they put me in a cell there. Then they take me to the DC local jail where they fingerprint me again, and then I get a second set of mug shots. Then they take me to the US Marshal building where they fingerprint me again, and I get my third set of mug shots, right? Now, I've never seen any of these mug shots because sometimes you can Google someone and their mug shot comes
Mugshot
up.
comes up. Yeah.
So none of mine do, and I'm a little sad by it, right? Because I'm just curious to see like
How'd they turn out?
right, and the progression from the first one to the third one, right?
In
In a
Because I
matter
know
of like hours.
exactly hours had set in, and so I was finally allowed to call my attorney. And when they came to get me from my house, I had told my husband, "Hey, get my cell phone, my attorney's number, call him and tell him what's happening, and also call my co-defendant because she was in California, so it was 3 hours earlier, and I'm like, they're probably going to come for her as well." So it was very stressful. And after that, I knew that it was very serious, right? Like I just wasn't completely sure up until that point because I would go meet with them. They'd say, okay, how about this charge? And then my attorney would be like, no, because X, Y, and Z. And they'd be like, okay. And then they'd go away for maybe 4 to 5 months.
Right.
And then they'd come back again. And then they'd go away for another 4 to 5 months, right?
So
And
they are just not letting it go.
never. They're incessant, right? And it is nonstop for years. And so I'm just like, oh, has just become a part of my life. Like, oh my God, here come the FBI again. You know what I mean?
Well, and they're dragging it out so much that it's like, I mean, you'd think if they had something, this would be over by now.
Yeah, exactly. But no, and they indicted me in 2017 because that was when the statute of limitations was up.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. So even if I wasn't convicted, they were able to kind of buy themselves some time because in order to indict me, they have to get permission from a grand jury. And so what my attorney always said is that they will indict a ham sandwich, right? Like it's really easy to get a grand jury to give you them permission to get an indictment. So I would be really interested in being a part of that process and just kind of seeing how that happened, which is one of the reasons why I would love to get a pardon because right now my civil liberties are stripped from me. So that's one of the things I can't do is serve on a jury.
Right.
Yeah, which is actually the only thing I miss because in DC I'm able to vote. And
You are able to vote. Okay.
I'm not able to bear arms, which
Right.
I don't necessarily care too much about that, right? And then I'm not able to run for office, which I also don't necessarily. Oh, actually, now you can run for office with a criminal record. There's currently someone in the DC jail who is in office. He's like a local ANC. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and I think like I should know since I live in Canada, but I don't. But a lot of these things they differ from state to state and region to region.
They do.
That in terms of like being able to hold office and stuff, where I don't know if provincially here in Canada it's the same.
I couldn't answer it either.
I mean, it's probably one of the things that somebody wouldn't think about until they're in a position.
You're faced with it.
Yeah, until they're in a position like you are.
But that's been a lot of things now that I'm like, oh, well, like I know my husband was going to get a gun and he had applied for the license, but I wouldn't have been allowed to return to the house if he had.
I was going to say you couldn't even have it in the home, right?
No.
You had a trial by jury?
No. So
okay. Just because you were talking about wanting to serve on a jury, you did not. Okay.
No. So the grand jury is what determines if you can get an indictment in federal trial, right? Like, so there's kind of a difference between federal law and then state law. And then since DC is not a state, there's local laws. But what's interesting is DC only has a jail. And so jails, and again, I didn't know any of this, jails are only for short term, right? Generally are housed until you are convicted. So most of the time it's very transient. Once you are convicted, you go to prison. But there are no prisons in DC. So they served their time at federal prison, which is where I went, but my crime was federal. So I had
Right.
to go to, I was incarcerated in West Virginia, which is about 4.5 hours away from DC.
Wow. So that, I imagine, would make it difficult for visits with family and friends.
And my son at the time, he was
Yeah.
3. So, 3-year-olds don't want to talk on the phone,
No.
you know.
No. They
And
want to
it's not like
see
you can,
you.
one, you can't FaceTime or anything like that.
There's no
It's,
FaceTime. They did have video visits,
okay.
but you had to, you could only do a certain amount a week, and it was really hard to schedule them. So I tried to do video visits at least once a week, but he still was not really even into video visits,
No.
right? Like, it was heartbreaking too, because every time I saw him, he says, "Well, mommy, when are you coming home?" Because I didn't tell him where I was going, because children that age, everything is very black and white. So he's just thinking, okay, mommy's going to prison because she's a bad person, right? And I didn't want him to think that, so
No.
I lied and said that I was going away to work. He still doesn't know today, and I'm wondering,
Did
when
did he ever come to visit you in
he
person
did
there?
come
But he
to
was
visit.
just too little to really know what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was at a camp, which is the lowest level
Like
in the
minimum
prison system.
security. Yeah.
Right. So it goes like minimum, low, medium, and then high. So I don't know why the difference between minimum and low, but I was in minimum. There were not even any bars or gates. So like if one wanted to escape, you could just walk off the compound.
Right.
Right. We were just all knew we were being punished, and we knew better. So we just stayed on the compound.
Right.
Right. I even had a job. And this is what is so ridiculous about the prison system. So when I went to my sentencing hearing, so first I was convicted, and then like they waited like a month, and then I had to go back and get sentenced. And when you get sentenced, you're allowed to get letters of support, and you can have people come and speak on your behalf to talk about what a good person you are. Please don't send my friend to jail, da 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 da. So I spoke to the judge afterwards, and I had a bunch of people write letters, and I had a bunch of people, even people were flying out from all over the country to support me. Um, and the judge, I asked him, could I have an alternative to incarceration, right? Which, if you are on ankle monitor, it's still considered incarceration, because you're still under the BOP, the Bureau of Prisons supervision,
Right.
right? Then you can't leave the house, right? But he was like, no, you deserve to go to prison. And I'm still shocked, like, me,
Yeah.
So, but while I was incarcerated, I had a job where I was the town driver, right? And that means that I was able to take someone else that I was incarcerated with in a car alone, with a cell phone that was able to call the prison and 911 only. It was like an old school flip phone, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I drove them around the state of West Virginia. I would take them sometimes 3-4 hours away to like hospital visits, like if they had to have a colonoscopy. Somebody did a sleep study one time. Sometimes I'd take them to airports. I would take them to the bus station to go home. And I'm like, you trust me enough, and you know that I'm not a danger, to just let me drive around in a whole nother state with a
But I
car
couldn't just be
with
locked in my
someone else
house.
in my house, right? And
Yeah.
that's so asinine to me,
Yeah.
and
It makes no sense.
none. And it also boils down to money. I believe that the per inmate expenditure, for me, I think they got like $44,000, right? And that is just only like, that's just for room and board, right? But federal prison is like a cash cow, because I had to buy all of my hygiene. Like in jails and in state prisons, a lot of times they'll give you stuff, but in federal prison, like you have to buy your soap, and then
Fuck
like,
off.
yeah, you have to buy soap, you have to buy shampoo, you have to buy toothpaste, you have to buy toothbrushes.
Tampons.
How are you? How?
Well, you do get, they started giving you sanitary products.
Okay. I was
Okay.
gonna say, yeah.
Which I've learned so many ways to use a tampon. Okay, like, like they would take the end of this, the string on the end, and untwine it, and they would thread eyebrows.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah,
That makes sense.
Yeah, they would use the top part of the tampon to wash dishes because it's textured. Like one side is a little rougher than the other, so one side could scrub and
Oh
then
my
the other
God.
clean, right? Um, sanitary napkins are really good for streak-free glass windows. Like so, if you're
No
cleaning a
friggin'
mirror,
way.
it's so this is these are just little
Well,
sidebars.
there's that expression, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
you're in a situation where you've got to come up with ways to do things. So you get creative, apparently.
But how are you expected to purchase all of these things? Is it through what you earn with your jobs?
Absolutely not, because my first job, I cleaned the toilets and I made $5.25 a month.
Yeah, I was gonna say from what I do know, you don't make very much.
Yeah, not a day, not a week, not an hour. Even $5.25 an hour is outrageous, but I
Right.
made that for the month.
Why
So
bother? Like, why bother?
but I had to, because when I first got
No,
there,
why bother? Why bother paying you?
yeah, that's true, right? Because when I first got there, I was like, I don't think I want a job, right? Like when you get there,
And they're like, you
you
don't get
meet
a
with
choice.
like your counselor, and then like I'm reading through this information. I'm like, $5.25 a month. I was like, I had seen how much stuff cost on commissary. So like I was saying, the markup is really high for for some body wash, it was like $12. So shampoo, everything was really expensive. Even like ramen, like the little ramen
Yeah.
noodles, they're generally
Yeah.
like 29 cents in the supermarket, but they're $1 in the prison, right? So like the markup on everything was
They're
just
making money off the inmates.
absolutely. I mean, so much money. I had to buy a pair of work boots and I had to buy some Timberlands and they were like $125. If you want to wear anything other than the khaki uniform that they give you, you have to buy it. So like they give you something grays. So we call them our grays. You get gray sweatpants and you can get gray sweatshirts and gray sweat shorts and like a gray shirt. Those are all expensive. And it's just like Russell Athletics,
Right.
right? And so I also noticed there's this brand in prison, and he must be so paid because he has a contract with the federal prisons, and it's a company called Bob Barker, not to be confused with the host of The Price is
Wheel of
Right,
Fortune
right?
or the Price is Right. Yeah.
Right. So, but it's just some company called Bob Barker, and they provide the BOP with everything.
Wow.
And so people like your family, right? Your family has to put money on your books just for you to survive, and that's you become a strain and a burden. And that's one of the reasons why I even started the Bend Down Project, because to incarcerate a woman is just such a unique aspect when you take a mother or a grandmother or a sister away from their community, and then you realize the impact that it has, because most of the time we're the main caregivers, and then in a lot of cases maybe the main provider. So when you take that away from the family, it's already difficult. And then you become an instant hardship, right? Because, hey, I need some deodorant. I don't want to be, you don't want to be stinky. I just need some soap. These are just the bare necessities. It's not even like you're asking for, the luxuries. So
Yeah.
like, I just want some lotion, or, you know what I mean?
Was any of that explained to you before you
No,
went there? Like,
absolutely not.
how do you prepare yourself? So, I mean, at some point, you're going to jail, you're going to prison,
Mhm.
you're going to serve time. Like, how do you prepare yourself for that?
When I started I had to start going to court like once a month after my indictment. It became really heavy on me. So I was like, let me get into therapy. Right. So I got a therapist and that helped. But one of the things I do really well, and I don't know that I should be proud of this, is I compartmentalize. Right. So I look at the situation and I decide what I can deal with and what takes priority. And then I take everything else and then I put it up on the shelf. Right. So once I finally had been sentenced and I knew that I was going to be incarcerated, my main priority was my son. And then after that was my business, because in the interim, from being on administrative leave, I opened up my own bar, right? Because I had to get a whole new career. I mean, I wasn't working for like 7 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I needed my income still. And I needed, to make sure that my son was okay. And so what I ended up doing is I put him in preschool early. I was like, this is a school that he can stay in. And I was just trying to build
Consistency.
consistency.
Yeah.
Exactly. I had a nanny who was only working at the time 2 days a week because, like I said, I had my days free, so I didn't really need her. So then gradually I added her on so that she became full time. So that was another consistency in his life, right? And then she would pick him up from school. Then I would gradually kind of lessen the time that I saw him just so it wouldn't be so drastic. And it was really difficult, right?
Yeah, that
I'm
sounds like
so,
so hard.
heartbreaking.
Yeah, but it was like I felt like I had to do it because for him
Yeah.
to just be with me all the time. And I breastfed my son up until he was 3, right? So we're super close. And so like, it was hard. And so that is just kind of
It's
how I handled it.
well, and it's just interesting that when Tisha asked, like, how did you prepare for it? It's just such a mom answer that it was
Mhm.
so focused on
Yep.
your
Yeah.
son. It was all about your son.
Yeah. And
How
then
do
I'm
you
like,
help
oh
him
my God.
adjust?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
knowing you're not going to see him for so long, there must have been part of you that just wanted to spend every single second with him.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then what's best for him
Hmm.
is to actually, for you to kind of start pulling away.
Yeah. No, I mean,
What
it's
an
hard.
impossible decision.
It was
Like,
hard, like the hardest thing I've ever done. Like even like now I have a lot of mommy guilt,
mhm,
like, and some
mhm.
people will be like, sometimes my husband might show me because like I missed like a birthday, I missed like a Christmas,
Yeah.
I miss like these holidays, like, ones that are exciting for him. And, he'll show me photos of like, or I'll see a photo like when I was like incarcerated and it was like on his birthday or Christmas, and then I'll just start crying,
Of
right?
course.
Because I
Yeah.
missed it and
Yeah.
I feel guilty,
Mhm.
and I can't get that time back. And I think that's the thing about it. Like you can't get that time back, like no
Yeah.
matter what I do now, there's nothing I could do. And then also while I was away, everybody felt bad for my son, right? So they like spoiled him
Spoiled
rotten.
him. Yeah.
And so I get back, my dad came and stayed with my husband so that he could have some support because my husband works a lot and my dad is retired, and so he was able to come out and help out, like taking him to school and just kind of hanging out with him. So my son now is super attached to my father,
Right.
because it was kind of like the relationship I had with my son, he kind of transferred it
To
to
your
my dad.
dad.
So I'm super grateful for
Yeah.
that.
Like, it's beautiful that they have that.
Exactly. But that it was also like just 3 men in the house, right? I come home, like my son, it's like 10, 11 at night. My son is like chilling. He's like 4. And I'm like, well, what's happening? Like, why?
Why is this
Why
going
Isn't
on?
he in bed?
what is he doing? Like, why is he eating McDonald's and Popeye's chicken every day? Like, it was just like,
It
it
was
was
free for all
horrible.
boy time.
It was super boy time. Like, I didn't like before I left, he wasn't playing video games. Like now him and my dad are like playing like age inappropriate PlayStation games. Like my son is like amazing at Call of Duty, right? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm the worst mother ever. Would never ever have let him play it. But then when I came back, like he's like so good at it. And I'm like, I don't want to come back and then be the witch,
To take
like
that all
I'm
away. Yeah.
gone, and then now I have to come back and be the bad guy. And I was to an extent like right with the schedule, but then I was just like some things I just had to let go. Like, okay, he's playing these violent video games.
Isn't it like messed up though as a mom? Like I feel like this is obviously a much more extreme version of that, but I don't know. Like I'm a mom of boys too, and I feel like I'm always the bad guy.
Yeah, always the bad guy. Yeah,
Always
like
the bad guy when it comes to that
but
kind of stuff. So you went to prison in 2019. So were you in prison like because we're in pandemic times now, like when the pandemic hit, or were you already home?
yeah, I was. So I
That
got
must have been petrifying.
released. It was like so right when the pandemic kind of started,
Mhm.
I was incarcerated and they put us on complete and total lockdown.
Right.
Right? We couldn't leave like our cubes or cells. We couldn't shower. It was disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was times that we had to use the bathroom. We had to hurry up. It was a mess. And they were totally unprepared to deal with it. I mean, much like the rest of the world, right?
Yeah.
but especially in federal prison, right? Because the federal government is, whoa, it's super disorganized. So when the pandemic hit, it was crazy. And so I got scared because I was due to leave March 25th.
Oh,
And they had
geez.
started, I know, and they were like, you can't leave state lines anymore. And I'm like, what does this mean? Like, if I have to stay in this fucking place a day longer, like, I'm
Right.
going to freak. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to tear this place up.
Yeah.
So I'm
Well,
gonna
I
say,
just think of like in a prison, there's so many people.
yeah. And in my prison, in particular, there's about 1,200 women.
Yeah, like I mean, so you couldn't leave your room, cell, whatever you're gonna call it, and you couldn't like like
You know, we're women and we have issues every time. At least once, you know, a
once a
couple of days
month,
out of
but
the
you got
month,
some stuff.
right?
You got some
So
stuff to
yeah,
deal with.
yeah, like this is like, come on, please, you know, and nope. And they were just rigid like that anyway. Like there were women once their lights out, like you couldn't use the showers. I was fortunate enough to be, because this was one of the things I was super worried about. Like I thought I was going to have to be in this massive room showering with like a bunch of women watching me, like, and just, you know, I'm just picturing this one big shower head and we're just all soaping up, you know what I mean? Like another, like,
Yeah.
because these are the type of things that you see in the movies.
That's
I'm
what you
like,
see in the movies.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like, oh
I've
my,
watched Orange is the New Black.
right, exactly. Right. So I was lucky enough, we had stalls, right? So we could close ourselves in with like a latch, and it was like little metal stalls. So but they were all, it was like one room and it was away from the cubes, so you had to kind of go down there. But yeah, but when we would like get lights out in the middle of the night, like I knew a couple of people, like if you know, messed yourself in the night, as you do at times, you want to get up and you want to shower and change your clothes. If you got caught in the shower, you would get reprimanded and you would get a shot. That's what we called written citations. We called them shots.
Okay.
And you would get a shot, and a shot could enhance your prison time, right? Because when you come in, you get a certain amount of good days off. But anytime you get an infraction or get in trouble, they will add a day to your sentence, right?
Gotcha.
So
Because you're getting days off for good behavior, basically.
assumed good behavior, yes, initially.
That's interesting that they assume good behavior. I mean, that's good.
Yeah.
I wouldn't
And it's
expect
not
that,
even,
to be honest.
exactly. It's not even really days off. It's just away from the prison, because I had to serve my entire, you know, time. I just didn't have to serve it all in the prison.
So March 25th came upon you. Then what happened? Were you
So
able
my
to?
husband was able to come and get me.
He was,
My husband
okay.
and my cousin. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was,
Phew.
hold on.
So your husband was able to come and get you.
Yeah, he was able to come and get me. And then I actually feel like for a lot of women, the pandemic kind of helped get them home a little earlier
Faster.
on ankle monitor, right? Because people were dying,
Right.
you know, and that's a big liability.
Yeah.
Another thing, you are freezing in prison, right? Because they have to keep the temperatures low, because they say that it helps to contain viruses. So it was like, I was incarcerated in the mountains in West Virginia, so it was very cold. And then it was like sometimes like it felt like it was more cold inside of the prison, and everything is cement, right? So it's like, you know, enhanced by that cement, like it's like holding strong to that cold. Yeah. And then we only were allowed one set of linen. So one of the things that we would do, we would try to, you know, get additional linen, right? And
like try to steal it,
basically. So like if someone was leaving and you'd be like, hey, can you go down and get your linen? I really want your linen. I need your blanket. I'm freezing at night. So if you were caught, and the blankets were very, very flimsy, right? If you were caught with a blanket, you would get in trouble. Like they would take your extra set of linen and you would get a shot, right?
If you were caught, oh wow.
Did you ever get a shot?
I never got a shot.
Good for you.
Yeah.
No, I was like,
but it sounds like it's easy to get one.
Super easy, but I'm an angel, like for real.
Or you were when you were there, especially.
No, like really though, like, and that's even why I was able to have my job, right? So when people found out that I was able to go out into the community, there is no smoking on federal in federal prisons.
Mhm.
So everybody is like, oh, my man can meet you out and you can bring in this carton of cigarettes and you can make $1,000 off this carton of cigarettes. And I'm like, first of all, where do you think I'm hiding these cigarettes? Okay.
Right?
It's not going to be where you think it's going to be.
Not
Second of all,
happening.
it's not happening. Second of all, I don't care about having $1,000 in prison. I was like, how much ramen does one need to buy? You know what I mean? Like, and thirdly, I was like, you think I'm going to extend and risk spending extra days here?
For your
And that,
cigarettes?
and that would be an actual additional charge because it would be considered introducing like contraband to the compound, right? So
Right.
that I could just get a whole nother sentence from that. And I also see now why, it's so easy to stay in prison because it's so easy to rack up random charges because of that, right? Like
Yeah.
women who are in relationships and they get caught having sex with each other, that's an additional charge, right? Which you probably don't think about,
No.
No.
and it's very common to have relationships while incarcerated because a lot of times you just need some comfort.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You're traumatized. And then some people you're just queer, right? So queer, like I tease, like my bar was considered a safe space for queer people of color. And I used to tease like some of my friends that would write me and I'd be like, listen, if you ever go to prison, like you will win, okay? Because there is nothing but beautiful women here.
Yeah.
There's a ton of women here
Right.
and they will want you and you are masculine presenting and that is where it's at, right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Like when we would call them studs. Like if a new stud came on the compound, like everybody was like, oh, did you see the new stud? I'm gonna give her some ramen. Like I mean it's just and I used to just laugh. Like everything was just really comical, and of course it had its times and there were fights and different things like that. But I was able to avoid all of that because I was
Mhm.
older too, right? I was in my 40s. So I'm not going into prison and making like trying to prove something,
Well, and
you know.
involved in the drama and any of
None of
that.
that. None of that.
You wanted to get home to your family
Mhm.
and deal with all of that. So now you're coming on to 2 years since you
Mhm.
have been out.
So May 1st will make 2 full years.
Okay. Oh, that's right,
Mhm.
because you got out of prison, but then you were on ankle monitor at home.
And they didn't let me go home immediately. I have to go to a halfway house. So I guess it's the halfway house is to transition you before you go home because I guess they feel like they don't want you to just have too much freedom, right?
Right
So
away because you just might go crazy.
you might just go crazy, right? With this newfound freedom. So that was also hard too because I told my husband, don't bring, my son when you pick me up because he's not going to understand when I have to go to this random house,
Yeah.
Yeah, and not
so
home.
and not home. So then I had to, prolong seeing him again. And the halfway house was maybe worse than prison in a lot of ways. One, just because even like mentally, you're so close from home to home,
Yeah.
right? I'm like, my
Mhm.
halfway house was like 2.3 miles away from my
Well,
house.
I was gonna ask, were you back in DC at that point, or did you have to
I
stay
was
in
in
West
DC.
Virginia? Okay.
Mhm. They give you a halfway house in the city that year going back to, right?
Okay.
And in
Yep.
some places, it's like some places it might be an hour and a half away from your house. But for me, DC is a small city, so
Yeah.
it was close. And so it was like, this is stupid that I have to be here. And then it was like duties, like, right? Like I'm just like, so I had to like mop the steps. That was my job in the halfway house, which is
Mm,
really annoying.
yeah.
Mop and sweep, and then you had to like sign off, and I had to do it twice a day. And these are things that like I had never done this before in my life. Like I've never swept or mopped steps, right? Like I grew up in Los Angeles. We had one-story house. Like I don't even know what this means. So I was just like, oh, I hate all of this. I hate all this
I
labor.
just want to get home.
When I get home.
Um,
It was so bougie. I'm so bougie. Like My friends laughed at me. They were like, I can't believe you're going to prison, right? Because even when I travel, and even my husband, like, we'll go to a hotel room and I do like this inspection, and he's like, I'm not even gonna unpack because I know we're about to switch rooms.
Because there's something
And I'm like,
wrong. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, because I don't know what is this on the wall right here. Let's move. I don't like it. Let's switch rooms. Sometimes we have to
And now
switch
you're
hotels.
going to prison.
And then I'm going to prison, right? And then the crazy thing is, like, I'm sleeping on, we all had to use, it was used linen, right? So the prison would just wash it and give it to you. So there's like menstrual stains all on it. And I'm like, oh my God, like, that's not, because it's not my stains, right? Like,
Yeah. Well,
so
so then
These are things you would never think of.
No.
never.
Like
I'm
you're
like
sharing
sitting in
these
the
like
middle of the bed, like holding my knees, like scared, like I don't know what kind of critters, like I don't know anything. Like, it
Yeah.
was crazy. Yeah.
So are you more bougie now or less after your experience in prison?
I think I've become I'm a little more laxed, right? But I still
Yeah.
don't want to sleep on like the flower bedspreads at a hotel,
No,
right?
well, I mean, no.
Yeah.
No.
I remember one time the prison that I was at was huge, right? So like just to go eat, I had to like walk a mile.
Oh.
So when we had to go drop off the linen, it was almost a mile too. And you had to drop it off by 7 in the morning, right? Like, so everything happens super early in prison, right? So I was dropping off my linen, you drop it off, your dirty linen, and they give you like your clean linen all rolled up. And I remember he gave me this clean linen, the guard, and it had like just like tears and holes all in it. And I was just looking at it, and I went to him and I was like, please, can I just have some linen without holes in it? And he laughed and he was like, okay, right? But generally they don't exchange it. But like the condition of this linen was so terrible,
bad, yeah.
that he had to even laugh. Like, all right. He
like,
knew that I
okay,
wasn't
you've got
like,
a point here.
you got a point. Like, he was like, all right, but
So
otherwise you shut up.
were you able to go back to doing the work that you were doing prior to all of this?
So I probably can never work in education again.
Yeah, I was assuming that.
Mhm. And definitely I can't go back to the DC school
No,
system.
probably not.
Yeah.
But is that, I remember, like, I read on your bio somewhere that you went to Howard University. Is
Mhm.
that what you studied for?
No,
Okay.
I got my master's in education, but
Okay.
undergraduate, so I was like just really into just exploration, right? So when I went to undergrad, I remember my junior year, my counselor called me, my advisor, and she was like, you need to declare a major. And I was like, oh, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. And she was like, well, if you want to graduate, like, you have to declare a major, and right now with me over the phone. And I was like, okay, what do I have the most classes in?
Yeah.
Right? And she was like, Spanish. And I was like, boom, that's
right. There we go.
So you majored in Spanish.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to go back to this idea that we were talking about before about people who are in prison.
Mm-hmm.
You met people like you while you were in there?
So, okay, funny thing, before I went to prison, right, I was embarrassed, right, because it has such a stigma. So I didn't want anybody at the bar to know that I was being incarcerated. I didn't tell a lot of people. So I came up with this really astronomical lie. And I told everyone that I was going to study with a shaman in a rainforest. I didn't even specify the country, right? I'm just assuming Brazil, right?
Sure.
But I needed a lie that was ridiculous enough that worked, where, I'm not going to be responding to your emails because the rainforest, and then I can't answer the phone or text messages because the rainforest. So this is the lie that I told
I
people.
mean, it's a great cover story.
Thank you. I
Well,
thought
it's like one of those things that it's like so outrageous that you almost
who's
have to
gonna
believe
lie
it. Like,
about
why
that?
would you lie about that? Yeah.
Right. Who's going to lie about that? But me, I did. Right. No. So, so I went away and I met all these women. And one of the good things about my position was I was able, like, generally you can really only interact with people within your unit. But because I was the town driver, I was able to meet a lot of different women.
Yeah.
And when you're just kind
Mhm.
of one-on-one with them on the road, like everybody wanted to share their story with me. So I was
Yeah.
able to get just a lot of insight and just meet so many various women from like various walks of life, right?
Mhm.
And everybody shared their story. And some people were absolutely had done wrong, right? And some people, it was like, it was a lot of technicalities with the federal government, I will say that. But one of the consistencies was that no matter what they were convicted of, I never thought that the punishment warranted that crime, right? And so I begin to see like how the government was almost obsessed with incarceration, right?
Mhm.
Like one lady, and God bless her, she was sweet like pie, but up here, no ma'am. She was a widow and she was receiving Social Security from her, husband who was deceased, and then she got remarried. And so for 2 months, she collected on his Social Security before stopping it. And did she do it on purpose? I'm not sure. Was it a lot of money? Absolutely not.
No.
But she got like a year and a day in federal prison for that. It was her first
Wow.
offense. And this was like a grandmother. There were a lot of like older women that were incarcerated too. It was shocking, And so that's what I said, like, you never think, like, what does someone who's incarcerated look like? There is
Mhm.
no prototype.
There's no one way.
There's no one way. When you're thinking, yeah, there might be somebody that has a ton of tattoos and they're incarcerated, but then there also were like grandmothers like with walkers, or just people that
Wow.
you'd never anticipated being incarcerated. The one lady that I knew that was the oncologist, her company, she hired a company to do her medical billing, and apparently they fudged it, and because they were billing for Medicaid, and that's federal money, and
Right.
they messed it up, and so she ended up getting 20 years in prison because of the amount of money that they had misbilled for. And they were like, she should have known. Like everything with the government is like the federal government, you should have known, right? So not having knowledge of the law does not excuse you from it.
Wow.
Mhm.
So even though she wasn't the person doing the billing, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
It was her business and she
Her
would
Right.
have been
business.
benefiting from it.
Exactly. And they were
Right.
like, you should have known. And she was just like this older, doctor. And she was like, I was busy. I wasn't even paying attention to the money. Like my patients are dying. This is what I'm focusing on. I'm doing
And I
chemo.
hired a company to do it so I wouldn't have to.
But I wouldn't have to. And she
Right.
was also like, I don't even know how to do it, like,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I know how to treat people for cancer. That's just so wild. So what does your life look like now?
So now I am back in school. I'm currently now at Georgetown University. I am in an entrepreneurship program,
Okay.
Mhm.
and I like it. It's a lot of work, and I hadn't been to school in years,
It's a
that had
lot, and
happened.
you're a mom, like,
And I'm a
you're
mom,
busy, you
right?
got other
So,
things going on.
yeah, I mean, then I ended up closing my bar during the pandemic. So I
Right.
would like to open up in another space. I had kind of outgrown it, and it didn't have the capacity to do the transitional outdoor seating. So
Mhm.
it just really wasn't worth keeping it open because rent in DC is very expensive, and I didn't
Mhm.
want to just continue paying on it while it was closed. So
Well, I
what
feel
I
like
would
it was a wild time to be in the hospitality industry anyway.
was, luckily my staff, that's what I cared about the most. Like, oh my God, they're going to lose their jobs. I also have a restaurant. The restaurant was able to stay open because we always had the kind of carry out infrastructure,
Right.
right? Which was what a lot of restaurants struggled with
Hmm.
because they didn't have that to go aspect already. So
Right.
we had kind of a restaurant where you come in and you come up and you order, right? We
Yep.
didn't have like a waiter doesn't come to the table. So it
Yep.
was already this to go kind of, infrastructure. So that staff was able to be absorbed at the restaurant. And so everybody was able to keep their jobs. So I was kind of thankful for that. And then the
Mhm.
restaurant is doing really well. Unfortunately, because of the George Floyd situation, a lot of people came out to support, Black businesses, right? So
Yeah.
it was a plus. So I was able to make more money and pay those employees. It was just, lucky, because that's what I really felt bad about.
Yeah, because you have that responsibility and that weight on your shoulders that other people are depending on your business for their livelihood. It's not just you, right?
Right,
So
right.
that does make sense. So I'm glad that that worked out for you. Do you think that if you were white, anything would have worked differently in your case?
I so I know I think about this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I think it would have been, they would have been more inclined to drop the case, right? I don't think they would have gone all of the way.
Right.
As far as the judge always sentenced within the guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happens is everything within the federal sentencing, they have sentencing guidelines. So
Mm-hmm.
you can always go to prison if you get convicted of a federal crime, because the lowest sentencing guideline is from 0 to 6 months, right?
Okay.
So at minimum, you could go, I mean, a max, you could go for 6 months. Everything is a number, everything is calculated. They totally miscalculated ours, but because I signed the plea, there was really nothing I could do about it. So
Mm-hmm.
he sentenced me at the lower end
Mm-hmm.
of,
Okay.
the guidelines, because it was 12 to 48 months. And he sentenced me to 13. And then he sentenced my co-defendant to a year and a day.
That's reasonable. Like they didn't go for the max sentencing
Right.
that they could give you.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do wonder, like, would they have kept pursuing it for so many years and trying to like
Yeah.
find some type of
And I
charge
don't,
that was going to stick?
and I think I had like a black attorney too, who was like
Mm-hmm.
an ass. He was an asshole. Love him. He fought for me,
He was good
right?
for you,
Yes.
but
But it also probably didn't help, because I think it just frustrated them, because he was like, no, this is not going to work,
right.
you know, and I think like he used to get into it with the AUSA all the time.
Mhm.
And I'd be like, oh my God, this is my life.
What is going on?
But he was fighting for you,
He
right?
was, he
Like
was, he
for your
was.
best interest. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it was like double blackness, right? Like
Too
I'm black,
much. Yeah.
he's black, right? And then they're like fighting. And so I often think about that. And then I guess we just won't know,
Can't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I do now through the Bend Down Project is I talk to women who are getting sentenced. Sentencing is the hardest part of it all, because it is, again, the anxiety and the anticipation of the unknown,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they're like, I'm like, you're going crazy. You're doing all this research online and you're looking up cases that are similar to yours, and you're trying to see what these people were sentenced to. And none of that matters, because it's very specific to your judge, right?
Right.
And so that's what I tell women. I was like, you can look this up all you want, but it's your federal judge who is going to make this determination. And if he likes you, he does. If he sentences within the guidelines, if he doesn't, you can look up maybe his history of sentencing to kind of get an idea of that. I was like, but you're never going to know, because every case is so specific.
Mhm.
I can totally relate to that,
Mhm.
trying to research and find the answers on the internet and like going down a rabbit hole where you're really
Rabbit
never
holes.
going to get the answer, right?
Never. There's never going to be a case that's exactly like yours that has the same judge.
With the
Mhm.
exact same circumstances. Yeah.
Exact same. It's never going to happen. And you
Right.
got to
Mhm.
and I'm like, you have to let that go. Like I was just telling this one woman, and I was like, does your co-defendant have the same judge? And she was like, no. I was like, well, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't
Right?
matter.
Like,
Well,
it
it
doesn't matter.
probably goes down even to like how that judge is doing on that day, right? Like
Absolutely.
it's
And
like
that's the thing.
we're humans, and
We are human.
that is
Yeah.
just
Could have gotten to an argument with the spouse that morning, or their kids did something, their car could have gotten broken into. You could have gotten a flat tire, and that
Who
is
knows?
another thing
You
that
remind them of their ex-wife.
I was just gonna say, you remind them of some like horrible ex they had.
that is another thing, another issue, right? Like this is why, again, it's not fair that my life was up to this one man, no matter what
To like
his,
whatever his day was
whatever
that
he's
day.
going through, whatever
Yeah.
his beliefs are, and you could say like, oh, I'm not biased. I mean, really? You know what I mean?
Everyone is.
Everyone is. It's
Everyone is.
natural. It is natural.
Can you
you know.
talk to us more about the Bend Down Project and what you do? I mean, I would imagine you started it as a result of your experience, but kind of tell us a little bit.
So kind of again, like, so after meeting all of these women, I think my eyes just opened, right? And I was like,
Mhm.
I'm not ashamed of anymore. Like, I feel like the Department of Justice should be ashamed for incarcerating these mothers, these daughters, these sisters, you know what I mean? And so upon my release, well, a little bit after, like the December of 2020,
Mhm.
I started the Bend Down Project. And it's basically, it's my digital platform and it's my stories and my voice where I'm just talking about what happened to me, kind of shedding a light on the federal criminal justice system, and also just trying to, destigmatize and humanize what it means to be incarcerated, right?
Mhm.
Because I was completely guilty of it myself, just the way that I perceived people that were incarcerated,
Yeah.
and I didn't care, also because it didn't affect me directly. So just opening people's eyes to that. So some of the things I do it kind of with a sense of humor, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're always just talking about, the harshness of prison, it can be very daunting, and people don't want to hear that all the time. So I do it with a little bit of humor. I also feel like my my charge is more palatable, um, right, than other.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't have a murder charge, which is, I'm not judging people that do, but that is a more difficult charge
It
to
feels less forgivable.
exactly.
When you
Yeah.
say you went to jail for an email, people that's more relatable maybe
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I
Yeah.
think it also drives home the point that it could be anyone. It could happen to anyone.
Right. Also, what I do is I try to support women through, I guess, coaching and mentoring, right? So if you're about to go to prison, if you're
Mhm.
facing incarceration, while you're incarcerated, and just helping their family, just
Mhm.
how do you put money on the books? What can I take to prison? How do I write? What do I need to do? And then coming out of prison, right? Which can be really difficult.
Yeah.
Because in certain places, if you have a felony, you can't, it's hard. Landlords don't want to rent to you.
Mhm.
Um, when I first got out and I was on probation, I found a commercial spot that I really wanted to open the bar in, and they would not give it to me because I was on probation, and they were like, "You could go back to prison at any time, so we're gonna pass."
Right.
And I was
Mhm.
like, wow. So
Right.
like it was like oh, okay, this is real,
Mhm.
because I think sometimes, like, I don't even think like, oh, I'm a felon, and
Well,
I've been to
that's
prison,
not, that doesn't
like,
define you.
right, right. So I still kind of just keep it like, oh, it's business as usual, especially now that I've dropped the shame, right? And I've just come out. And it took like
Mhm.
a huge weight off of my shoulders too, to not have to
Yeah.
live with that stupid shaman lie, right? Like,
So did you then go to people you had lied to and said, "By the
I
way,
did
I
not.
wasn't in a
I was
rainforest"?
not that humble, right?
Okay.
I definitely was not. Mm-mm. I was like, they gonna find out from my Instagram
They
page,
can
or
just stay, they can find it online.
you can find out when everybody else finds out, right? Like,
Exactly. It's interesting though what you're talking, like the women and the mothers and the federal justice system is, taking out of the communities. And I've talked a lot like here and just kind of throughout the pandemic how it's, this whole time has really highlighted how little the like government thinks of women. You know what I
mhm,
mean? And just that moms will just be there to homeschool children, virtual school children, and moms will walk away from their jobs because their families need them to be home. And it, just like a complete lack of seeing all that women bear on a day-to-day basis. And this is just
mhm,
like another way that kind of shows that,
absolutely.
um, which
And
is
just even the whole mental health aspect of it
Mhm.
all, right? I mean, just even like having to be on lockdown and just seeing the way people are falling apart, having to be at home,
Mhm.
especially if you're a single woman, and you're by yourself. Like, that has been so difficult for a lot of people, just the rise, I
Jen will
know.
tell you all about
Well,
it.
yeah, I'm a widow with two small boys, so
Yeah.
like,
Hmm.
yeah, it's a lot, but it's what you experienced in the prison system, though, kind of almost doesn't explain it, but it's like, well, this has been going on for a while, obviously. It's just
Yeah, so
more
all of
pain.
it definitely helped the cause. Like, everybody is like, oh my God, I'm feeling so isolated and this is cruel and da 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 da. But then you think about, okay, people that have been in prison for years
Yeah.
in solitary confinement, right? Like, how do you think that they're faring? And I think it's just people are talking more about it now, where if as before a few years ago, if there was zero conversations about it, and will I ever be going and speaking in front of Congress? I'm not sure, right? But I just try to do my part and just make people aware of what's going on, and
Mhm.
I'd love to do more.
I've seen on your stories you do this like ask me anything, and people really ask you anything.
They do anything, anything. And that's kind of even how I started my TikTok. Like I would save one of the questions and then just put it on my
Put it
TikTok.
on TikTok. Yeah. It seems like a really amazing way to reach people, and social media is a great place to start with sharing your story and elevating your voice. And we really believe in like obviously the power of story and sharing experiences, because it's how we grow in empathy. It's how we learn more about different experiences. And I think it's really how we build community.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When people share their stories, people are so wise. Like all these people are just walking around with all this wisdom that they're just not sharing or that we don't even know how wise they are because they don't share their stories. So, there's that. And just like Jen said, just trying to hear different people's lived experience and help people sort of develop some empathy in that way and understand what other people really are going through.
Yeah.
And also to let other people know that they're not alone, because lots of people are in prisons.
They are. And I get
Lots.
so many messages like when I post something like, oh my God, I was incarcerated. I would this and this and this. You're so brave to tell your story, and I haven't in a while. Like I've been kind of stagnant. I haven't posted on my Instagram in a long time because I used to do where I would spotlight formerly incarcerated women, but it's so hard to find a woman who is open to just saying that I was formerly incarcerated. Right. That's because of the stigma. And, a lot of them, because we're mothers and, just being judged and just different things like associated with that. It's, so I haven't been able to find anyone. Like I feel like I've exhausted all of my efforts and my energy. Like,
Yeah, I'm sure that's well, we so much is fueled through shame, right? From like the way we're marketed to just, the way we interact. And I think
absolutely.
Yeah.
My opinion is that life's too short for that shit.
Yeah.
But it's hard. But I think it's only through the more that we share things that either we felt shame about or people perceive as being shameful that we can kind of break that stigma.
Absolutely. To even get to the point of that, right? And so like even before I came out with my story, because everybody was like, oh, when are you gonna do it? You need to do it, you need to do it, because it took me from like May to December to really be like, all right, but I'm like, I had to look at myself and then I had to think about like what is my threshold, right? Like what are the buttons that somebody can push? If I share this very vulnerable part of me, and what can someone say that is going to just crush and destroy me, right? And then once I kind of figured out it's not much, or if somebody did say something, or this is the worst case scenario, the worst case scenario was not the worst case scenario, right? Like so now I'm just kind of like, somebody will be like, oh my God, you're, like they'll put under one of my videos, you're such a criminal. And I'll be like, oh, God bless you. Like, or I'm like, thanks for the feedback, right? Like I have zero cares. Like, and it's a lot of it is funny.
What would you hope that somebody might take from hearing your story? Like, I don't even know that you could say, like, give someone advice as to how to avoid your situation, because it's not like you were trying to be in any kind of a situation.
I wasn't. It's, I have this joke only amongst my friends, right? Now it's going to be amongst all of your followers.
Mhm.
That I was like, if I knew that I was going to be a felon and go to prison, I would have lived a felon lifestyle, right? Like I didn't come home to like any hidden money or like, like I wasn't living it up pre-prison because I had taken money. Like I wasn't on yachts and like,
Right.
just doing foolishness, right? Like
Yeah.
so like they're laughing at me and I was like, no, but for real, like, right? I was like I was like I said, like was like being a model citizen. I was doing everything I thought I was supposed to, and surprise. So I think I would just say what I want you to take is just, don't judge people, right? That's to
Mhm.
me kind of a big thing, right? Just, never really judging someone. You don't know their situation. You don't know what they were in or what they were facing or up against. So just kind of being, I think we can all be so judgmental at times.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think that's something everybody could use these days, a reminder to like
Yeah.
lay off.
Yeah. And that's what I do. Like now I kind of just don't sweat the small stuff, right? Because like I tell people, I feel like I know what it feels like to get the rug pulled out from underneath you,
Mhm.
and so a lot of stuff in the grand scheme of things just doesn't matter.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think both Jen and I can relate to having the rug pulled out from under us. And that's sort of why we started this podcast. So there you go.
Thank you, Amber, so much
Yes.
for sharing with us. I love meeting you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we were able to come together.
Yes.
Yes. Thanks for listening to Now What. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a review. Your ratings and reviews help more people like you find our podcast.
Don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone you think would love it. Until next time, remember, your hard times are the chance to write another chapter.